The massive crystal dome stretched high above the galactic council chamber like a frozen ocean wave. The morning light from 3 different suns filtered through its surface, casting rainbow patterns across the floor where hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in their assigned seats. Ambassador Daeho Kim adjusted his black suit jacket and looked down at the stack of papers before him. Each page contained another human solution to another galactic problem: water purification systems for the desert worlds of Sector 7. New medical treatments for the plague affecting the Crystalline Union, better farming methods for colonies struggling to grow food. He had been sitting in this same chair for 12 years now, watching the same patterns repeat over and over again. Humans would present their ideas and innovations. The alien delegates would take these gifts without a word of thanks. Then someone would inevitably make a comment about how violent or primitive humans were today. Felt different, though. Daeho could sense tension in the air that went beyond the usual political arguments. His aide Jin Woo Park sat beside him, organizing files and data tablets. The young man had learned to read the mood of these meetings perfectly. After working here for 5 years, the Vorthan delegate stood up from his seat 3 rows away. His gray skin gleamed under the chamber lights, and his 4 eyes focused on the human section with obvious distaste. Vorthans had been part of the council for over 800 years, and they never let anyone forget their seniority. The humans have submitted another proposal. The Vorthan announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. They want us to adopt their new hyperspace navigation improvements. Murmurs filled the chamber as delegates leaned toward each other, whispering comments in dozens of different languages. The translation systems worked overtime, converting alien thoughts into understandable speech. Ho stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the chamber turn toward him. The navigation improvements would save thousands of lives every year by making space travel safer and faster. Human engineers had worked for 3 years developing the technology. Using principles that other species had never considered, the improvements reduced travel time by 30%, he said clearly. Our tests show they also eliminate the risk of ships getting lost in hyperspace storms. A few delegates nodded appreciatively. The Aquatic Collective had lost 2 ships to hyperspace storms just last month. The improvements could prevent such tragedies in the future. But the Vorthan delegate was not finished speaking. He raised one of his 4 arms, commanding attention from the entire chamber. While these improvements might have some merit, we must remember what we are dealing with here. Humans are violent primitives who have barely left their home system. They lack the wisdom and experience needed for such advanced technology. Daeho felt his jaw tighten. Those words had become far too familiar over the years. Every time humans contributed something valuable, someone would dismiss it by calling them primitive or violent. It did not matter that human peacekeepers had ended 3 civil wars in the past decade. It did not matter that human doctors had cured diseases that had plagued alien worlds for centuries. Jin Woo Park looked up from his files, sensing the change in his ambassador's mood. The young aide had seen this pattern before, but never quite this intense. Daeho's hands were gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Furthermore, the Vorthan continued, humans have shown time and again that they cannot be trusted with important responsibilities. Their emotional nature makes them unpredictable and dangerous. We should use their technology, but we should not allow them to control it. More murmurs filled the chamber, but this time they sounded more agreeable. Several delegates nodded their heads. The Crystalline Union representative actually made a sound that translated as approval in their language. Ho looked around the chamber at faces he had come to know over the years. The Zephyrian delegate who had personally thanked him last month for human assistance during their colony crisis now avoided eye contact. The representative from the metal worlds who had praised human engineering just weeks ago was nodding along with the Vorthan's words. These beings had no problem accepting human help when they needed it: water when their worlds were dying, food when their colonies were starving, medicine when plagues threatened their populations, technology when their own scientists failed. But they would never accept humans as equals. The Vorthan delegate was still speaking, his voice growing more confident as he saw support building around the chamber. Perhaps it is time we establish new protocols for primitive species. We could create a separate category for beings like humans, useful for certain tasks but not qualified for full membership in civilized galactic society. That was the moment something broke inside. Daeho Kim 50 years, humans had been part of this council for 50 years. They had saved lives, built cities, ended wars, and solved problems that other species could not handle. They had done all of this while being called primitives and being treated like useful pets. Jin-woo Park saw his ambassador start to rise and immediately began gathering their files. The young man had learned to recognize the signs. His hands moved quickly, sorting papers and closing data tablets while keeping one eye on Daeho. The chamber grew quiet. Daeho stood to his full height. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried an edge that made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. For 50 years, he began. Humans have sat in these chambers listening to speeches about our primitive nature. We have listened while contributing more solutions than any other species. We have listened while our peacekeepers died protecting your worlds. We have listened while our doctors worked around the clock saving your people. His voice grew stronger with each word. Jin-woo Park had finished packing and was now standing beside his ambassador, ready to leave. Other human delegates throughout the chamber were also beginning to stand, sensing what was coming. We have given you water purification systems that ended droughts on 17 worlds. We have given you medical treatments that saved billions of lives. We have given you farming techniques that turned barren planets into gardens. We have given you navigation systems that made space travel safe for everyone. The chamber was completely silent now. Every being present could feel the weight of Daeho words. The human contributions were undeniable. They were written into the official records of the council, archived in databases that could not be erased, but apparently none of that matters. Daeho continued, because we are still just violent primitives in your eyes, still just useful servants who should be grateful for the chance to serve their betters. He looked directly at the Vorthan delegate, whose gray skin had taken on a slightly darker shade. You want to establish protocols for primitive species. You want to create separate categories. You want to use our gifts while denying us respect. Jin-woo Park touched his ambassador's arm gently, a silent signal that everything was ready. The other human delegates had gathered their materials and were waiting. The moment had arrived. Daeho Kim looked around the chamber one final time, taking in the faces of beings he had worked with for over a decade. Some looked confused. Others appeared worried. A few seemed to finally understand what was happening. Well, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber, you no longer have to worry about dealing with primitive humans anymore. He turned toward the exit and began walking. Jin-woo Park fell into step beside him, followed by every other human in the chamber. Their footsteps echoed in the absolute silence that had fallen over the council as they reached the great doors that led out of the chamber. Ho paused and looked back one last time. The hundreds of alien delegates sat frozen in their seats, watching the humans leave. "We're done," he announced, his words carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. Then he walked through the doors, followed by his aide and every other human representative behind them. The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. The humans were gone, and for the first time in 50 years, the chamber felt strangely empty. The great crystal dome continued to cast its rainbow patterns across the floor, but somehow the light seemed dimmer now. The age of human participation in galactic politics had just ended with the closing of a door outside the chamber. Jin-woo Park activated his emergency communicator and sent out the signal that would change everything. The message was simple, but its implications were enormous. Operation Homecoming was now active. The emergency broadcast reached Captain Hai-jin Lee while she was supervising the loading of rare mineral containers aboard her cargo ship. The stellar Dawn 3 moons hung in the sky above the mining world of Kepler Station, casting strange purple shadows across the loading dock where dozens of alien workers moved heavy crates with mechanical precision. Captain Lee had been expecting this message for years, but hearing it still sent a chill down her spine. The quantum communication array crackled with static before delivering the words that would change everything. All human vessels return to soul space immediately. Operation Homecoming is now active. Repeat, all human vessels return to soul space immediately. Her mixed crew of Zephyrians, aquatic collective members, and 2 crystalline Union engineers stopped their work and stared at her. The Zephyrian First Officer Kex, who had served with her for 8 years, approached with obvious confusion in his large golden eyes. "Captain, what does this Mean, he asked his translator, converting his musical language into standard galactic. His species communicated through harmonious tones that sounded like singing to human ears, Captain. Lee looked at the beings who had become her friends over the years of deep space cargo runs. They had shared meals, told stories during long hyperspace jumps, and worked together through dangerous situations that had bonded them like family. But orders were orders, and she had sworn an oath long ago, it means. In going home, she said simply. Her fingers moved across the navigation console, plotting a course back toward Earth. The calculations showed it would take 6 weeks to reach Soul Space, even with their fastest hyperspace drive. But what about the mineral? Shipment, Kex asked, gesturing toward the containers that held rare elements worth millions of credits. The buyers on Vorthan Prime are expecting delivery in 10 days. Leave it, Captain Lee, replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. The Stellar Dawn has new orders now across the galaxy. Similar scenes were playing out on thousands of human ships. Station Commander So Young. Kim received the broadcast while overseeing the largest mining operation in 3 sectors. Her innovative extraction methods had revolutionized how rare metals were pulled from asteroid fields, making previously impossible mining profitable and safe. The mining station orbited a massive asteroid rich with elements that dozens of species needed for their technology. Without the constant flow of these materials, entire industries would collapse within months. But So Young had her order. She activated the station-wide communication system addressing the 3,000 alien workers who had become her responsibility over the past decade. Attention all personnel, this mining operation is now shutting down permanently. All non-human staff should prepare for immediate evacuation. Response was immediate chaos. Aliens throughout the station began talking at once, their various languages creating a babel of confusion. The Crystalline Union workers who communicated through light patterns began flashing rapidly, while the aquatic collective members released pheromone clouds that indicated extreme distress. Mining supervisor Vel of Vorthan, who had worked under So Young for 6 years, approached her office. His 4 eyes showed the kind of panic she had never seen from his normally composed species. Commander, what is happening? Why are we shutting down? So Young looked at her alien colleague, who had become something like a friend over the years. They had solved countless problems, together improved safety protocols, and built something truly impressive in this remote corner of space. But the friendship had always been built on her staying in her place as the useful human who made things work. Humanity is going home, she said simply. That is all you need to know. But Commander Vel protested. The extraction equipment requires constant human oversight. Without your people here, the entire operation will collapse within weeks. We have contracts, obligations. So Young began entering shutdown codes into the main computer systems, the massive mining equipment that could strip valuable metals from solid rock began powering down for the first time in 8 years. Those are no longer my concerns. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri b, Dr. Seung-Min Choi was in the middle of his greatest breakthrough, his work on faster-than-light medical treatment had progressed beyond his wildest dreams. The new techniques could deliver healing compounds directly to damaged cells across interstellar distances, potentially saving millions of lives. His research team included some of the brightest minds from 12 different species. They had worked together for 15 years, pushing the boundaries of medical science in ways that no single species could have achieved alone. The Crystalline Union provided perfect mathematical precision, while the aquatic collective contributed biological insights that carbon-based species could never develop. Dr. Choi looked at the emergency message on his personal communicator, then at his alien colleagues who were celebrating their latest test results. They had just successfully treated a patient on a Moon 3 light years away using quantum-entangled medical particles. It was the kind of breakthrough that came once in a lifetime. Dr. Sung, the lead crystalline researcher, approached him, her light-based communication creating beautiful patterns that the translation system converted to speech. Our latest trials show 97% success rates. We could begin implementation across the galaxy within months. Dr. Choi felt his heart break as he began powering down the research equipment. The work of decades was being abandoned at the moment of triumph. But he had sworn an oath to humanity, and that oath came before personal achievement. The research is terminated, he announced to the Shocked silence that followed. All human personnel are leaving immediately. But another researcher protested this could save billions of lives. Surely human interests include preserving life throughout the galaxy. Dr. Choi paused at the laboratory door and looked back at beings who had become his closest colleagues. They had shared the excitement of discovery, the frustration of failed experiments, and the joy of breakthrough moments. But they had also sat quietly while their governments called. Humans, violent primitives, human interests, he said quietly, are no longer your concern. The exodus was not limited to space stations and research facilities on colony worlds throughout the galaxy. Human settlers began the largest evacuation in galactic history. Farmer Min Ho Park had spent 20 years turning the barren world of New Eden into a garden. His agricultural innovations had created a food production system that fed 17 different worlds, the alien colonists who had settled alongside. Humans on New Eden watched in growing panic as their human neighbors loaded everything they could carry onto transport ships. The farming equipment that kept the colony alive required human expertise to operate. Without farmers like Min Ho, the colony would starve within months. Governor, we cannot let the humans leave, pleaded the colony administrator, a member of the Metal World species. Their food production systems are the only thing keeping our people alive. Min Ho looked at the administrator, who had never once thanked him for the years of backbreaking work that had made the colony possible, the same administrator who had supported the council resolution last year calling for special restrictions on human colonists. That is no longer my problem, he replied, loading the last of his personal belongings onto the transport. But surely you cannot abandon innocent civilians, the administrator protested. Min Ho paused and looked back at the green fields that had once been lifeless dirt. His life work was being left behind, but his conscience was clear. You should have thought about that before calling us primitives, he said, then walked onto the transport ship. Communication networks throughout the galaxy began lighting up with panicked messages as the scope of the human exodus became clear. Trade captains reported human vessels abandoning valuable cargo to return home. Research stations went dark as human scientists departed colony worlds, sent desperate pleas for their human residents to reconsider, but the humans kept leaving. Ship after ship disappeared into hyperspace, headed for the small yellow star that had given birth to the species the galaxy had taken for granted. For 50 years humans had spread across known space, contributing their talents wherever they were needed. Now that same space was watching them vanish like smoke in the wind. The Galactic Council chambers emergency sessions were called as reports flooded in from every corner of civilized space. The Vorthan delegate who had triggered the crisis sat in stunned silence as the full implications became clear. They are actually leaving, announced Council leader Vex, whose species had ruled space lanes for millennia. All of them, every human ship, station, and colony is being abandoned. The chamber erupted in panicked discussion as delegates tried to understand what was happening. The humans had always been there when needed, providing solutions to problems that other species could not solve. Now they were simply gone. On Earth, the returning humans were greeted by massive preparation efforts. Admiral Yunji Kang had spent years developing contingency plans for this exact situation. Shipyards that had been building vessels for galactic trade were retooled to support human expansion. New colonies were planned in systems far from alien influence. The galaxy had called them primitives. Now they would see what primitives could accomplish when they stopped serving others and started serving themselves. The age of human servitude to galactic civilization was ending. The age of human independence was about to begin. 3 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared into hyperspace, and the galaxy was beginning to understand the true scale of their loss. The first crisis hit the hyperspace navigation systems that connected every civilized world. Unknown Space Council leader Vex stood before the emergency assembly, his normally composed demeanor cracking under the weight of cascading disasters. His species had ruled space lanes for over a millennium, but they had never faced anything like this. The hyperspace beacon network is failing, he announced to the packed chamber. 17 major trade routes have become unsafe for travel in the past week alone. The hyperspace navigation system had been humanity's greatest gift to galactic civilization. Human engineers had spent decades mapping safe corridors through the dangerous dimension that allowed faster-than-light travel. They had placed millions of beacons to guide ships safely from star to star and maintain the complex network that kept galactic trade flowing. Without human maintenance, the beacons were beginning to drift from their positions. Solar radiation damaged their delicate electronics, and no one else understood the human-designed systems well enough to repair them. Ships that had made routine jumps for decades were now getting lost in the howling chaos of hyperspace. The Zephyrian merchant fleet had learned this lesson the hard way. Captain Nex had been running cargo between the core worlds and the outer rim for 20 years, using the same hyperspace route every time. It was a journey so routine that his navigation computer could make the jumps automatically. But when the Zephyrian fleet of 50 cargo ships attempted their monthly supply run the hyperspace beacons that marked their route were no longer where they should be. Solar wind from a distant star had pushed them out of alignment by just a few degrees. In hyperspace, a few degrees might as well be 1,000 light years. The entire fleet vanished into the swirling chaos of that impossible dimension. Their emergency beacons went silent, and search and rescue teams could not locate them without the human-maintained beacon network to guide their own ships. Captain Nex and his crews joined the growing list of beings who had paid the ultimate price for their species' treatment of humanity. Their cargo holds full of food and medical supplies that outer rim colonies desperately needed would never reach their destinations. The trade disruption was only the beginning. Food distribution networks that had operated smoothly for decades began collapsing as shipping became unreliable. The agricultural specialist Min Ji-yoon had designed a system that moved food from producing worlds to consuming worlds with incredible efficiency. Her network had taken into account the growing seasons of hundreds of different worlds, the dietary needs of dozens of species, and the complex logistics of moving perishable goods across interstellar distances. It was a masterpiece of organization that had ended hunger on 47 worlds. Now that system was falling apart without human oversight. Cargo ships carrying grain from the farming worlds of Sector 7 could not find safe routes to the hungry populations of the inner core. Vegetables from the garden worlds spoiled in warehouses because transport schedules had become unreliable. On the ice world of Thermos Prime, Governor Cal watched his food reserves dwindle with growing panic. His world had specialized in mining rare crystals that other species needed for their technology, but the frozen planet could not grow its own food. We have enough supplies for 6 more weeks, he reported to the council. The human-designed supply chain brought U.S. fresh food every 10 days. Now we have not received a shipment in over a month. Similar reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Worlds that had become dependent on the human food network were facing starvation. Industrial worlds that focused on manufacturing had never developed their own agriculture. Luxury resort worlds had never considered the need for food production. The medical crisis was even worse. Dr. Tae Hyun-oh had spent 30 years building a galactic medical database that contained treatments for diseases affecting every known species. His system could diagnose rare conditions, recommend treatments, and coordinate medical supplies across thousands of worlds. When the database went offline, alien doctors found themselves helpless against diseases they had not seen in decades. Human-maintained medical knowledge had made many conditions so rare that current doctors had never learned to treat them. On the water world of Aquatica, a plague that attacked the breathing gills of the native species began spreading rapidly. Dr. Vell, the planet's chief medical officer, had never seen the condition before because human treatments had eliminated it. 20 years ago, the medical database contained the cure, but without human technicians to maintain the system. The information was locked away in corrupted files. Dr. Vell sent desperate messages to Earth begging for medical assistance, but received no response. Similar medical emergencies erupted across the galaxy. The crystalline Union faced a condition that caused their crystal bodies to develop fatal fractures. The metal world species experienced a magnetic field disruption that affected their electronic nervous systems. Even the ancient Vorthans discovered that diseases they thought were extinct were returning with devastating force. But perhaps the most terrifying crisis was the failure of the asteroid monitoring system. Humans had built a network of observation stations throughout the galaxy that tracked dangerous Objects like rogue asteroids, solar flares, and unstable planets Darji-Wu. Han had coordinated this system from his station orbiting Earth using data from thousands of sensors, placed throughout known space. His early warning system had prevented countless disasters by giving worlds time to evacuate or take protective measures without human monitoring. Cosmic disasters struck without warning. The paradise world of Garden Prime was hit by an asteroid that should have been detected months in advance. The impact killed millions of beings and turned a beautiful world into a burning wasteland. The solar flare that sterilized the research stations in the Proxima system could have been predicted days in advance if human scientists had still been watching the stellar activity monitors. Space habitats were evacuated too late. Orbital cities crashed into planets and entire populations died because they had no warning of approaching dangers. In the council chambers, panic replaced the usual political maneuvering. Delegates who had spent decades arguing about territorial disputes and trade agreements now faced the collapse of galactic civilization itself. "We cannot contact Earth," announced Communications Director Hex, his mechanical voice carrying despair. "All human communication frequencies have gone silent. They are not responding to any messages." The desperate aliens had tried everything. Official diplomatic channels were ignored. Trade offers worth trillions of credits went unanswered. Personal pleas from alien friends of human officials received no response. Earth had cut itself off from the galaxy completely. The Vorthan delegate who had triggered the crisis sat in his seat looking smaller than before. His 4 eyes no longer held the arrogant confidence that had characterized his speeches. Instead, he stared at reports of failing systems and mounting casualties. "Perhaps we were hasty," he suggested quietly. "Maybe we should have considered the consequences of our words more carefully." Council leader Vex turned on him with fury that surprised everyone in the chamber. "Hasty? You called them violent primitives. You suggested creating special restrictions for their species. You treated beings who saved our worlds like servants." The chamber fell silent as the weight of their mistake became clear. For 50 years, they had benefited from human innovation while treating humans as lesser beings. They had taken credit for human achievements while dismissing human capabilities. They had accepted human sacrifices while denying human worth. Now, the galaxy was paying the price for their arrogance. Trade routes were collapsing, worlds were starving, diseases were spreading, and cosmic disasters struck without warning. The humans were gone, and no one else could fill the void they had left behind. Emergency teams tried to repair the failing hyperspace beacons but lacked the knowledge to understand human engineering. Alien doctors attempted to recreate the medical database but could not interpret human research methods. Scientists worked desperately to rebuild the monitoring networks but could not match human observational techniques. Every attempt to replace human contributions failed spectacularly. Alien engineers could not understand the elegant simplicity of human designs. Alien doctors could not replicate the intuitive approach humans took to cross-species medicine. Alien scientists could not match the human ability to see patterns that others missed. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the true value of the beings they had called primitives. Humanity had not just contributed technology and knowledge. They had brought a unique perspective that made everything work better. Without that perspective, the carefully balanced systems that supported galactic civilization were falling apart. Like a machine losing its most essential component, the humans were gone, and the galaxy was discovering that it could not function without them. 3 months after the Exodus began, the question was no longer whether the aliens would apologize to humanity. The question was whether galactic civilization would survive long enough for apologies to matter. 6 months after the human exodus, the galaxy was descending into chaos. Systems that had operated smoothly for decades were failing one after another, and alien governments found themselves facing crises they had no idea how to solve. The panic that had started in the Galactic Council chambers was now spreading to every world in known space. On the manufacturing world of Factory Prime production, Manager Keck stared at the massive assembly lines that had once produced starships for dozens of species. The factories had operated at peak efficiency for 20 years thanks to the innovations introduced by human engineer Dong Hyen Park. Dong Hyen had revolutionized their production methods, introducing concepts like predictive maintenance, flexible manufacturing, and quality control systems that eliminated waste while increasing output. The factories could produce a complete starship in half the time it had taken before human involvement, but now the production lines were grinding to a halt. The predictive maintenance system required constant adjustment by someone who understood its complex algorithms. Without Dong Haiyan supervision, the machines were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. "We are operating at 30% capacity," Kex reported to his corporate board. "The human design systems are failing and our engineers cannot understand how to fix them." The Crystalline Union representative on the board flashed patterns of distress through his translucent body. "Our contracts required delivery of 200 ships per month. We have only completed 40 in the past month." Kex looked at the production reports that told the same story throughout the galaxy. Human design systems were failing and no one else could maintain them. The elegant efficiency that humans brought to every project was being replaced by alien confusion and mounting disasters. The situation was even worse on worlds that had relied on human agriculture expertise. The farming colonies that had been turned into food production centers by human agricultural specialists were facing complete crop failure. On the breadbasket world of Harvest 7, farming coordinator Vel watched his fields of grain turning brown and dying. The crop rotation system designed by human specialist Han Wu Kim had sustained incredible harvests for 15 years. Han Wu had understood something about soil chemistry and plant biology that alien scientists had missed. His farming methods had increased crop yields by 400% while actually improving the health of the soil. Over time, the farming world had become the primary food source for 12 different star systems, but without human oversight, the delicate balance of the farming system was collapsing. The soil was becoming depleted, the irrigation systems were malfunctioning, and plant diseases that had been controlled for years were returning with devastating effect. "The entire harvest will fail," Vel reported to the Agricultural Council. "We will not be able to feed even our own population, let alone export food to other worlds." The news sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Worlds that had depended on food imports from Harvest 7 began implementing emergency rationing. Governments that had never worried about food security were suddenly facing the possibility of mass starvation. The medical situation continued to deteriorate as alien doctors struggled to treat conditions without access to human medical knowledge. Dr. Rex, the chief medical officer for the Zephyrian homeworld, was dealing with a crisis that threatened his entire species. A respiratory infection that attacked the complex lung structures of his people was spreading rapidly. The condition had been eliminated decades ago through treatments developed by human Dr. Su-Jin Park, but the specific cure was locked in the corrupted medical database. Dr. Rex had tried everything he could think of. Traditional Zephyrian medicine had no treatment for the condition. Modern alien medical techniques were useless against an infection that human doctors had understood perfectly. "We have lost 15% of our population in the past month," he reported to the Galactic Health Council. "The infection is spreading faster than we can treat it with conventional methods." Similar medical emergencies were erupting throughout the galaxy. The Aquatic Collective was facing a fungal infection that damaged their breathing apparatus. The metal world species were experiencing electronic nervous system failures that left them paralyzed. Even the mighty Vorthans who had triggered the human exodus were not immune to the crisis. Their advanced immune systems were being overwhelmed by a bacterial infection that human antibiotics had kept under control for generations. The infrastructure failures were becoming catastrophic as well. Power generation systems that had been upgraded with human technology were breaking down. Transportation networks designed by human engineers were failing. Communication systems that relied on human-maintained satellites were going dark. On the trade hub world of Commerce, Central Space Traffic Controller Next watched his displays with growing horror. The orbital traffic control system that managed thousands of ships per day was malfunctioning badly. The system had been designed by human engineer Min Seo Park, who had created an elegant solution to the complex problem of managing spacecraft traffic around busy worlds. Her system could handle 10 times more traffic than previous methods while virtually eliminating collision risks. But now ships were getting lost in the approach corridors. Automated guidance systems were sending vessels to wrong destinations and the collision avoidance protocols were failing with increasing frequency. 3 ships collided in orbit this morning. Next reported to the Transportation Authority, the human-designed traffic control system is beyond our ability to repair. The economic collapse was accelerating as trade became increasingly dangerous and unreliable. The galactic economy had been built on the assumption that goods could move safely and efficiently between worlds. Human engineering had made that assumption reality without human-maintained hyperspace routes. Human-designed traffic control systems and human-operated logistics networks. Trade was grinding to a halt. Worlds that had specialized in producing specific goods could no longer export them to worlds that needed the crystalline union, which produced the galaxy's most advanced computer components, could not safely ship their products to buyers. The Aquatic Collective, whose medical research facilities created life-saving drugs, found their exports stranded in warehouses. Even worse, the communication breakdown was making coordination impossible. Governments could not effectively communicate with each other to organize relief efforts. Emergency services could not coordinate. Rescue operations and scientific communities could not share knowledge. The quantum communication network that connected all civilized worlds had been maintained by human technicians who understood the delicate physics involved in transmitting information instantly across interstellar distances. Without their expertise, the network was becoming increasingly unreliable. Messages were being lost, transmitted to wrong destinations, or corrupted beyond recognition. The galaxy was not only losing its infrastructure, it was losing its ability to organize a response to the crisis. In the council chambers, desperate meetings continued around the clock as delegates tried to find solutions to problems they barely understood. The Vorthan delegate who had started the crisis was no longer attending sessions. His government had recalled him in disgrace as their own world faced mounting disasters. "We must contact Earth at any cost," announced Council Leader Vex, his voice carrying the desperation that filled every alien heart. "Whatever the humans want, we must give it to them." But every attempt to reach humanity failed. Their messages disappeared into the void around soul space without any response. Earth had not just cut diplomatic ties with the galaxy, it had completely isolated itself from all alien contact. The desperation was driving some species to extreme measures. The Aquatic Collective announced they were converting their entire military fleet into cargo ships to carry medical supplies to plague-stricken worlds. The metal worlds were sharing their most closely guarded technological secrets in hope of finding solutions. The crystalline union made an unprecedented offer to share their mathematical knowledge with any species that could help restore the failing systems. Even the proud Zephyrians, who had never asked anyone for help, were begging other species for assistance. But nothing worked. Every alien attempt to replace human expertise failed spectacularly. Their engineers could not match human innovation. Their doctors could not replicate human medical intuition, and their scientists could not duplicate human observational skills. The galaxy was learning that calling humans primitive had been the greatest mistake in their history. Humanity had not just provided useful services, they had brought unique perspectives and abilities that made galactic civilization possible. Without those abilities, the carefully constructed systems that supported billions of lives across thousands of worlds were collapsing like a house of cards. The humans were gone, and the galaxy was discovering that it had been built on human foundations. As the crisis deepened, alien leaders were beginning to understand a terrible truth. They had not just lost useful servants. When the humans left, they had lost the species that made their civilization work. The question was no longer whether they could convince humanity to return. The question was whether galactic civilization would survive long enough for the humans to consider forgiveness. 9 months had passed since the human exodus, and the galaxy was in complete chaos. Entire star systems were going dark as their infrastructure collapsed without human maintenance. Billions of beings faced starvation, disease, and death while their governments scrambled desperately to find solutions that seemed impossible to achieve. The Galactic Council had abandoned all pretense of normal operations. The Grand Chamber, where delegates once debated territorial disputes and trade agreements, had been converted into a crisis management center. Holographic displays showed the spreading disaster in real time as red warning indicators marked failing systems throughout. Known Space Council leader Vex had not slept in 72 hours. His species could survive longer without rest than most, but even he was reaching his limits. The constant stream of disaster reports was overwhelming every available resource. The Zephyrian home system has gone completely silent, he announced to the emergency assembly. Their communication arrays failed 6 days ago, and we have received no signals since then. The implications were terrifying. An entire star system with billions of inhabitants had simply vanished from galactic communication. It could mean total system failure, plague apocalypse, or complete societal collapse. No one knew because they could no longer make contact. We must send a rescue fleet, demanded the Zephyrian representative, her musical voice breaking with desperation. But rescue fleets were becoming impossible to organize. The hyperspace navigation systems were so unreliable that ships attempting rescue missions were getting lost themselves. The Crystalline Union had sent 12 ships to investigate a silent colony. World 2 had arrived at their destination, 4 had ended up in completely wrong star systems, and 6 had simply vanished. A desperate situation was driving formerly proud species to actions they would never have considered before. The Vorthan government, which had spent centuries maintaining their position as galactic leaders, made an unprecedented announcement. We formally apologize to humanity for our past statements, declared Vorthan Prime Minister Orcs, his 4 eyes unable to meet the cameras broadcasting his words across the galaxy. We acknowledge that our treatment of human representatives was unacceptable, and we humbly request their return. The apology sent shockwaves through alien society. Vorthans had never apologized to anyone for anything in their recorded history. Their species had ruled space lanes for 800 years and had always maintained their superiority over younger civilizations. But the Vorthan apology was just the beginning. The Crystalline Union followed with their own statement, offering humanity complete access to their mathematical archives and computational technologies. The Aquatic Collective promised to share their most advanced biological research. The Metal Worlds went even further, offering to give humanity entire star systems as payment for their return. Even the ancient Zephyrians, whose species had existed since before recorded history, offered to make humans full partners in their government. Every message sent toward Earth was more desperate than the last trade agreements worth quadrillions of credits, technology exchanges that would advance human science by centuries, political positions that would give humanity unprecedented power in galactic affairs. But Earth remained silent. The small yellow star that had given birth to humanity showed no signs of alien communication. All frequencies that had once carried human voices remained empty. The quantum communication channels that had connected Earth to the galaxy carried nothing but static. The silence was driving alien leaders to increasingly desperate measures. Some species began sending physical messages carried by unmanned probe ships toward soul space. The probes were programmed to broadcast continuous apologies and offers as they approached the human home system. None of the probes returned. Whether they were destroyed, intercepted, or simply ignored, no one knew. The barrier around human space seemed absolute. On Earth itself, the situation was very different. Captain Junho Nam stood in the command center of the new human space defense network, watching as another alien probe approached the outer edges of Sol Space's console showed dozens of similar contacts over the past months. Each probe carried the same desperate messages from species that had once called humans primitive servants. The irony was not lost on him. They offer us entire star systems now, he commented to his aide Ensign B.O. Ra Park, who was monitoring the alien communications. The young officer looked up from her console, displaying the latest Vorthan message. The Prime Minister himself is begging us to return. He is offering to make you the head of their space fleet. Captain Nam laughed without humor. 6 months ago he had been a simple cargo hauler taking orders from alien port authorities who treated him like a second-class citizen. Now those same aliens were offering him command of their entire military. What should I do with this probe, Sir? Ensign Park asked. The same thing we did with all the others, Captain Nam replied. Send it back where it came from. The probe was caught by human tractor beams, turned around and sent back toward alien space carrying a simple message. Humanity was no longer interested in serving galactic civilization, but while the aliens grew more desperate, humanity was growing stronger. Admiral Yunji Kong commanded a fleet that would have amazed the aliens if they could have seen it. Human shipyards that had once built vessels for alien buyers were now producing ships of unprecedented capability. The humans had not been idle during their decades of service to the galaxy. They had learned from every species they had worked with, incorporating the best ideas from across known space into their own technology. Crystalline union. Mathematics had been combined with human engineering to create computers that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Aquatic collective biology had been merged with human medicine to develop treatments that could cure diseases affecting any species. The result was a human civilization that had evolved far beyond what any alien species could have imagined. The galaxy had treated humans as useful primitives, never realizing that those primitives were learning and adapting and becoming something extraordinary. Dr. Su-Min Choi, who had abandoned his research on alien diseases, now worked on projects that would benefit only humanity. His new medical facilities could treat conditions that alien doctors could not even diagnose. Engineer So-Young Kim, who had once managed mining operations for alien corporations, now oversaw the construction of human cities that dwarfed anything in the galaxy. Her innovative techniques were creating wonders that no alien architect could have conceived. The transformation was visible throughout human space. Colonies that had been simple outposts were becoming magnificent centers of learning and culture. Trade networks that had once served alien needs were now connecting human worlds in ways that created unprecedented prosperity. Meanwhile, in alien space, the collapse continued. The aquatic collective was facing complete ecosystem failure on their home worlds without human environmental expertise. The metal worlds were experiencing cascading system failures that threatened their electronic civilization. The Crystalline Union discovered that their mathematical perfection was useless without human intuition to apply it to real-world problems. Their beautiful equations could not solve practical engineering challenges that humans had handled effortlessly. Even species that had seemed completely independent were discovering their dependence on human contributions. The ancient Zephyrians found that their navigation systems relied on human-maintained hyperspace maps. Their exploration fleets were getting lost in sectors they had traveled for centuries. The realization was spreading through alien society like a plague of understanding. They had not just benefited from human services, they had become completely dependent on human capabilities. The beings they had dismissed as primitives had become the foundation that supported their entire civilization. In the council chambers, the debates had devolved into desperate arguments about blame. The species that had supported the anti-human rhetoric were now being attacked by those who were suffering the consequences. "This is the Vorthan fault," screamed the aquatic collective representative. "Their arrogance has doomed us all," the Crystalline Union delegate agreed, flashing angry patterns through his transparent body. "We should never have listened to their primitive rhetoric about primitive humans, but pointing fingers could not solve the crisis. The galaxy needed human expertise, and humanity was no longer willing to provide it. The species that had once ruled the stars were learning what it meant to be truly primitive. As the first year of the human exodus approached its end, the question was no longer whether the aliens would offer enough to bring humanity back. The question was whether there would be a galactic civilization left to make offers. The humans had walked out, and the galaxy was collapsing in their absence. The age of alien supremacy was ending, and a new age was beginning. Whether that age would include the aliens at all remained to be seen. 1 year had passed since humanity walked out of the Galactic Council, and the transformation was complete. The galaxy that had once dismissed humans as primitive servants now existed in two distinct parts. One part was collapsing into chaos and darkness, while the other was rising to heights of achievement that surpassed anything in recorded history. Admiral Yunji Kang stood on the bridge of the HSS Independence, the flagship of the human fleet, and watched through the massive viewport as construction robots completed work on the newest human space station. The structure was magnificent, a crystalline and metal masterpiece that combined the best architectural ideas from dozens of species with uniquely human innovations. The station was 10 times larger than anything in the old Galactic Council space, and it served as the hub for a trade network that connected over 200 human colonies. The network operated with an efficiency that made the old galactic systems look primitive. By comparison, Admiral, the communications officer reported, we are receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council. Admiral Kang sighed. The desperate messages from alien space had been arriving daily for months, each one more pleading than the last. As the situation in the old galaxy continued to deteriorate, put it on the main screen, she ordered. The holographic display showed Council Leader Vex, but he was barely recognizable. The once proud leader now looked haggard and desperate. His skin had lost its healthy glow, and his eyes held the kind of fear that came from watching everything you had built fall apart. Admiral Kang, he began, his voice shaking, we formally request a meeting to discuss the return of human participation in galactic affairs. We are prepared to offer unprecedented concessions. The Admiral looked at the alien leader who had once treated human representatives as useful servants. Now he was begging for help from the species he had dismissed as primitives. What concessions, she asked, though she already knew the answer complete. Human autonomy over previously established territories, Vex replied quickly. Full partnership in all Council decisions, shared access to all alien technologies and research, and his voice broke. Complete formal apology for our past treatment of your people. Admiral Kang studied the desperate alien leader. The offers were everything humanity had wanted a year ago: complete equality, recognition of their contributions, and respect for their abilities. But too much had changed. Tell me, Council Leader, she said calmly, how many worlds have gone dark in the past month? Vex hesitated before answering. 17 star systems have lost all communication. The infrastructure failures are accelerating. And how many beings have died from medical conditions that human doctors could have treated? The alien leader closed his eyes in pain. The estimates suggest over 1 billion casualties from treatable conditions. Admiral Kang nodded. The galaxy was paying a terrible price for its arrogance, but humanity was no longer interested in paying the price for galactic stupidity. Your offer is noted, she said finally, but humanity declines. The alien leader looked stunned. But Admiral, surely you cannot abandon billions of innocent beings. They had no part in the political decisions that led to this crisis. Admiral Kang felt a moment of sympathy for the beings suffering in alien space. But then she remembered 50 years of insults, dismissals, and condescension. 50 years of human contributions being taken for granted while humans themselves were treated as